What's going on, YouTube? I'm here with my first ever project for Flatiron School. It's a command line interface program written in Ruby, and it's a web scraper. The assignment was to create a gem that would scrape data from the web. What I chose to do was to scrape famous quotes from dude-like characters in movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Dazed and Confused, things like that, and to make it into a cool little funny program to use. And I've added a couple extra features since I last did a video, and I got a little bit better audio recording stuff, so I wanted to share with you and walk through it again. So hope you enjoy it. So let's get into it. So first, we're going to look at my scraper class, and this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. You see each one of these methods is a scraper or a scraper method for each character that I'm using. So just to get right into it, the first thing I do is I have my page URL variable that I set, and that's equal to the page that I'm scraping my quotes from for this particular character, which is just the Big Lebowski Wikipedia page, and actually contains different characters, not just Jeffrey Lebowski. Then you'll see a second instance variable saying it's called info URL. That's different, and I'll show you why I use that a little bit later, but basically it's set to a page that's just about that character, and each one of the characters will have a separate info URL page. So in order to get to Nokogiri to start working, I set a variable. Its name is doc, and you see Nokogiri HTML open. That's utilizing a gem called open URI, and then I'm setting that to the page URL that you see up here, so it knows where to look for these quotes. Right under that, just to set myself up, I have an instance variable called Lebowski array, and it's set to an empty array, and that is where I will be storing the quotes for this particular character. Under that is where the actual scraping is going to start to happen. So I'm passing the doc information, so that's all the HTML from the page, and I'm using a CSS selectors, UL and LI, those basically unordered lists and lists, which are the CSS selectors for the quotes on the page. And basically you set it up, it's like a loop. So you see I do an each do quote, so that's passing through each one of those on the page. And underneath it, I am passing those quotes into my Lebowski array that I created right up here. Now, I did mention that the first three characters here are all coming from the same Big Lebowski page. So in order for me to select just the quotes that I wanted for each character, actually, I had to do a little workaround. So right under here you see I set another instance variable Lebowski quotes, and that's equal to the Lebowski array that I've filled right above it. And then you see the indexes or indices 8 through 15, or 8 all the way through 15, including 15. And that's so that I could select just the quotes for that character, since they are, Nokogiri is pulling all the quotes from all the characters on the page. So that way, 8 through 15 were those elements that I needed just for this character. And once I loop through all that, I create a new instance of the character in my character class, you see down here, and it takes two arguments. The first argument would be the character's name, which in this case is Jeffrey the Dude Lebowski. And it actually takes three arguments, my apologies. The second argument will be the Lebowski quotes, which is the array of quotes just for that character. And the third is that info URL that we saw here on the second line, or on line 12. So it's basically the same setup for all of my characters. The only difference being that for Spicoli and Slater, they had their own page, and I didn't have to necessarily do the whole selecting certain quotes out of the index or out of my array, but I kind of still have it set up the same way, just that it was kind of all uniform, and I might just refactor that later because it is a little bit redundant, but same kind of setup with the whole thing. So with that, we can go into the character class and we can see how I'm using this information to create instances of these characters. So now we're in my character class. I do have a class variable that's equal to an empty array, and that's so I can hold each one of these objects. My initialize is going to take those three arguments that we saw before in my scraper. So when I'm creating new, so you see I have the name, the quotes, and info URL. So we're going to the character, we have the character, which will be the name, the array are the quotes, and the URL is the info URL. I'm setting those equal each to my instance variables, and then after that, I am pushing that whole thing, that new object into my character array. I have an all method in the bottom, which just returns the entire array, which I use later in my CLI. And then I have a quote generator that, I guess we can go back into this. It'll make a little bit more sense once we go through the CLI, and you can see how it works within that. So, but that's basically how I'm just creating these characters, and I'm storing them in my character array and getting them ready to be used in my actual CLI menu. So we'll get into that. This is my CLI. Right when we load it up, it's going to put out loading, and it's going to initialize each one of those scrapers to start getting that data, and then we get hit with this nice Deuter ASCII art that I found a generator. I'll probably link it below, but it's basically you type in anything and there's different options you can make to make cool ASCII art with it. It's basically just all formatting, and then the menu prompts, what's up dudes, welcome to Deuter, here's a quote from World's Greatest Dudes, choose your number below, and then it hits my menu method. So in the menu method, basically it's going to put out all the options here. So you see 1 through 7, 1 through 5 being characters, 6 is a feeling lucky, a random feature that I kind of just built in actually, and 7 is just your exit. And if you kind of notice just really quickly, like after all these things you see like dot white, dot red, dot green, I'm using a gem called colorize, which allows me to choose different colors when you do go into the command line interface, and that way it kind of spices up the look and it makes it just a little bit more interesting. So the way the menu works is I'm creating a variable input, which is just set to nil in the very beginning, and after you put this menu out, it's prompting you to enter an input. So I set the input equal to a get method, dot strip to I, so make sure it's just an integer, so that way it doesn't do anything funky with my menu. If the input's equal to 7, that's my exit. So it puts out thanks for hanging, catch you later, and it hits my exit, so that's how I exit the program. Else, if it's 1 through 5, I check that the input is included in 1 through 5. If it is, then it will go into a new character, or it'll hit my quote generator in my character class. And that's what we were talking about a little bit before, so I'll get back into it and explain how that works. So as you can see, I'm grabbing that same input. So let's say if you hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to pass that in right here. So when we jump back into my character, we go to quote generator, you see the inputs right there. So I have a chair, a car, or character just for short, because it was getting confusing with having like character many times, so this way I could kind of separate it and it wouldn't get confusing. And that's equal basically to the entire character array. That input we put in -1, since it's an array, we want to find the index. So if I didn't put that -1, we'd actually be getting whatever character was actually after that. So if it's Lebowski and his input's 1, he's actually 0 on the array. So that -1 allows us to make sure we're getting that. And then that's just his name. So dot name, we use our getter method just to get the name. And then chart quote, it's pretty similar. It'll choose that object within the array with our input -1. But then I'm going to use our quotes method, and then you see a dot sample method, which basically returns a random quote, because I wanted each time you choose it to be a random quote, but from that character. And then the way that I'm outputting that is I'm interpolating the character quote and the character variables here below. So that's how that works. So right back at it, we were right here. If input equals 6, and we've hit if input is 1 through 5, we hit our quote generator, it puts it out, and once it does that, it'll hit a sub menu, which is down below. Before we get into that, I'll just finish off this top menu. So if input equals 6, I have another variable, rand input. So this is my random option, feeling lucky, number 6. So the rand input is just equal to a random number between 1 and 5. And it does the same thing basically as if you were to enter a number, except it puts that rand input into it, so that way I get a random a random quote from a random character. And again, it'll drop us into a submenu. And then else, so if it's anything else besides 1 through 7, like if you put an 8 or type in a bunch of whatever, it's going to say that's like not an option, man, and it's going to bring you back to the menu. So it doesn't put out an error, or that is your error message, but it won't mess up the program. It'll just kind of bring you right back to the menu. So if you did put in something that worked and you get your quote, it'll drop down to a submenu below. And that'll give you a couple more options. This is something new that I kind of added since my last video to this program. So then you're going to have the options to get more info or go back to the main menu, or you can actually exit the program from there. And it's kind of similar. It's passing in that same input into the sub menu, which I'll show you why we use that, but then I'm creating also another input that I'll get. So that input below here is going to have to do with this new menu, whereas this sub input allows me to carry over information from the original menu to use to get more info here. So if input equals 3, that's my exit. Same thing. Thanks for hanging. Catch you later, dudes. And program exits. If it's 1, that's my get more info. So how that works is I created a new just instance variable here, character. It's gonna hit my character class and hit my all, which is that array of all the objects or all my characters. And the same thing, that sub input, which is the one I got passed in from before, -1. So that way it's still gonna give me more information about that character instead of taking this new input. And then it's gonna put that character's URL in red, and then you go back to the menu. If you hit 2, that's when I go back to the main menu. It's just gonna go back to the menu. And again, if it's anything else and it's not valid, it's gonna say that's like not an option, man. Try it again. So it's basically how this whole menu works. It took me a little while to make sure that it was kind of working the way I wanted to. I was getting a lot of errors when I was implementing this random thing because it was using the original input from here, so I had to kind of work around it with my sub inputs and my regular inputs. Hopefully that's not too confusing. But that's basically the entire build of it. So I guess we can just kind of go through a real quick demo so you can see it working. And yeah, so this is loading. Puts out Duder. We got our welcome screen here, and then we have our menu. So you have your option, like, so let's say we want to get a quote from the Big Lebowski himself. We'll hit number 1 and enter. And as you can see here, we see a quote, "Oh boy, I'm gonna keep him down on the farm once they've seen Carl Hungus" by Jeffrey D. Lebowski, and then that sub menu right below it. So if I hit get more info, 1, right here it's gonna give us our URL, and that way if you were to click it, it'll actually take us to a page that's just kind of all his actual information, not just quotes, but you know, like the character himself, and goes real in deep and stuff if you're real curious about that. But anyways, and once that hits, it goes right back into our main menu. So same thing for like any of the other characters. We can hit 2 and go back to the main menu directly. We can exit the program from there if we wanted to. So let's try number 6. Feeling lucky, and we get a quote from Jesus Quintana. We get, "You want a toe? I can get you a toe." And with that, we get that sub menu again. We can get more info about it, and again, we can click that link if we want. And here's him in all his glory, and you can find out more about him. All right. I guess to demonstrate, just to show you, like if I were to just kind of type in a bunch of random stuff, it's going to give us that error message that's like not an option and try it again. And then finally, when we want to exit, hit 7 from here, and it says thanks for hanging, catch you later, dudes. That's pretty much it. So there's still some things I could probably refactor and make a little bit more elegant and stuff, but for now it's working, and I got some extra features in it, and it definitely was a huge learning experience for me. So I'm really happy with it. Thanks for sticking through the video and watching, and see you around soon.